It's true that you certainly don't read it in any of the media, and isn't academia as well part of the deep state?
Yes, I totally agree with you. But I'm talking to Lew Rockwell, aren't I?
Yes, sir.
Well, you've talked about it, I believe, and I put
Yes,
you in my book
sure.
as one of the few good people that we should deal with. I don't, you probably didn't know that, but yes, I single you out as one of the rare people who has done this. And I'm aware, yes, Ron Paul, I'm not so sure about his son, but yes, Ron Paul has been a good person on this. I find that very hopeful because I would consider myself in many matters more on the left, and Ron Paul is often identified as being more on the right. But I think that what this country needs and potentially could and should have is a coalition of people who, from whether from the left or the right, have become upset at the amount of power that is accrued to the center. So that I would say, a terrorist center, because what the American government is doing overseas amounts to terror. I mean, if you're dropping drones villages, that's terrorizing people, and is a source of a great deal of the problems that we now face in the Middle East. So, yes, there are some people, not very many yet. And now, when you're talking about individual members of Congress, it may be there that people are frightened to confront the deep political system. I would point out that going back at least to the Vietnam War, anybody who's tried to do something about these powers, take the two people who voted against the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, for example, Senator Morse and Senator Bruning, both defeated in the next election. Senator Church was a mammoth hero, really, a
Yes,
hero in
yes,
its
great hero.
and defeated in the next election. The congressman who really did most to alert Congress to Iran Contra, defeated. And in fact, the Reagan administration had steered money into a special State Department committee that it was called public information, but what they were actually doing was targeting the people in Congress who had opposed the Contras and using public money to get their constituents to defeat them. So it is dangerous for individual congressmen to do this, and they know it. And it is possible that President Obama knows it too and is constrained in what he does, because certainly the rhetoric when he came in and the speech that he made about the Middle East in Cairo, I believe, back in 2009, it was a completely different approach to the Middle East from what we're seeing now with the drones and the aerial bombings. And there, I think my analysis is that there are the interests in, we have a very strange economy now. We're not really competitive as a civilian economy. We have a very militarized economy, and every now and then a militarized economy has to have a war. And back in Vietnam, they said, it's not a good war, but it's the only war we've got. And this ISIS war, I think, is a terrible war, but for some people, I'm sure they're saying it's the only war we've got.
Well, no question that the whole military industrial complex, all the merchants of death, as they were called in the 1920s, are constantly agitating for war and obviously for spending for selling weapons overseas. Um,
Right.
this is all obviously a key part of the deep state as well.
I do, by the way, talk quite a lot about arms sales overseas, and particularly arms sales. They used to be to Iran and Saudi Arabia, and now Iran, of course, has had a change of government with the fall of the Shah. But the Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, and it's not just that we strengthen the dollar by selling arms to those countries. This is where big oil comes into the picture, because the only stability really that we offset the costs of importing oil from abroad by arms sales to the countries we sell to. And well, it's quite complicated, and I go into it. But what I want to stress here is that since the sale of the AWACS back in the early 80s to Saudi Arabia, a percentage of those arms sales has been kicked back into secret bank accounts that used to be handled by Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia in the Riggs National Bank in Washington. which essentially was a slush fund to fund covert operations. So that's another way that the CIA is able to escape direction from Washington and the administration, because they had access to these funds of Prince Bandar, and that paid for, well, it paid for the Contras, it paid for operations in South Africa, Angola, and it's a whole kind of second budget just going along with the deep state being a kind of parallel state.
Professor, are you concerned about a roundup? Are you concerned about if there's something that happens, either contrived by the bad guys or something that's a surprise to them, that they're going to round up Americans and put them in internment camps, and Muslims too, of course?
No, well, Muslims is something else, but no, for the rest of us, I think that would be, if that happened, it's not inconceivable, but I think it would be in a sense, a great setback for this system. The system wants what we have now. So if that were to happen, then you would have people going underground, and we would have a situation comparable to, say, the 1960s, when there was fear of a roundup then, so a lot of the left went underground and started blowing up buildings. So I don't think they want that. And so I think it's unlikely. I think that they are, I suspect, well, I mean, actually, I don't suspect, I know that at present, Muslims in this country are being subjected to a special kind of surveillance, that they have informants in every mosque, and they coerce the FBI. The FBI has excellent guidelines on how to recruit informants. Unfortunately, they don't stick to those guidelines. And people get hauled in on very minor offenses, misdemeanors, and they're told that the book will be thrown at them unless they become informants. And this is terribly demoralizing, as you can imagine, for these various mosques. I don't want to suggest that there is no problem for them to be worrying about, because part of the problem is that Saudi Arabia, for decades, since around 1979, I would say, when they had a huge crisis inside Saudi Arabia, they have also been playing politics with mosques and offering large sums of money to mosques if they would hire Wahhabi preachers. And so there is a problem. But the way that the FBI has been dealing with it, I think, is I wish they would keep to their own rules, which they don't. There have been whole books written about this.
Not the first time that's happened, but
I see signs that people are becoming concerned about this and more aware of it. And we owe some of our awareness to whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, who, at least briefly, created quite a wave of concern, even in Congress. And the important thing is to be able to build from that concern and do something. I say in my book that the government right now is seized with a kind of mania, madness, and it's not the first time. The Palmer raids was a period of madness. The McCarthyism was a period of madness. They terminated, and one might hope that this would also terminate. The risk is that one of the byproducts of this is the huge amount of wealth that is being accrued, not just by the top 1%, but the top 0.001% of this country. And that is a factor both as a result of what I'm talking about and also as a cause of it. And it may have tipped us so much in the direction of secret power in the hands of Wall Street and other people. Look at the bailout of Wall Street. It didn't matter whether it was Bush or it was Obama. The Wall Street appointees just took a lot of our money and gave it to these big banks because that's part of the system. We have to fight that, and the first step in fighting it is being conscious of it.
Well, I think you're right that there is a reason for optimism. I see it especially among young people. Even when you see Apple and Google saying they're going to encrypt their new operating systems in a way that nobody can read them, including themselves, and certainly not the CIA or the NSA or much to the outrage of the FBI. I noticed talking about how terrible this is, and they can't spy on every single message.
I know, it's so weird. Here they are reinforcing the Fourth Amendment, And the government's talking about this as a threat to democracy. It is very, very ironic.
Well, it's a battle, but it's always been a battle. And thanks to people like you, Snowden, and others, people are being alerted. So I'm very excited about your new book. We're going to do everything we can here to promote it. And the deep state, it's the reality of American politics and American governance and of the American corporate state. And it's so important that people know about it. So thank you for all the work that you've done and continue to do. And thanks for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you. And I thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Professor. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks so much for listening to the Lew Rockwell Show today. Take a look at all the podcasts. There have been hundreds of them. There's a link on the LRC front page. Thank you.